The second captain of one of the small craft described what he saw as he arrived at the beach. It was dark, and then an aircraft started dropping parachute flares to light up the night. The sound of the firing and bombing was always with us. As we approached Dunkirk, there was an air attack on the destroyers. The beach, black with men, was illuminated by fires that seemed a perfect target. What I saw that night will remain sharp etched in my memory forever. There were lines of men wearily staggering across the beach, from the dunes to the shallows, falling into little boats. Great columns of men thrust into the water among bombs and shells splashing. The foremost ranks were shoulder deep, moving toward and under the command of young officers, themselves with their heads just above the waves that rode into the sand. As the front rank was dragged aboard the boat, the rear ranks moved up from ankle deep to knee deep, from knee deep to waist deep, until they came to shoulder depth, and then we pulled them into the boats. The little boats that ferried from the beach to the big boats in deep water listed very badly. The big boats slowly began to list on their own, with enormous numbers crowding aboard. Allied vessels took part in the Dunkirk evacuation, of which 693 of them were British. There were 372 small craft, of which 170 were sunk by German aerial and artillery fire. Of the 39 valuable destroyers, 6 were sunk and 19 were badly damaged, none of which the Royal Navy could afford to lose, given the inevitable battles which they were soon going to have to fight. The final tally, when the last ship drew away on 4 June, was 338 Allied troops had been rescued. This included 229 Brits, almost the entire manpower of the expeditionary force, and 110 French and Belgian crews. Operation Dynasty turned out to be a real win-loss situation for the British and the Allies. While the British Army salvaged their professional military cadre, of which they were able to form new formations, they lost the vast majority of their arms and equipment. The British Expeditionary Force left behind in France 64,000 out of 66,600 motor vehicles, which they destroyed prior to their leaving to keep them out of German hands. And there's a picture, I think, in the handout of some of these burned vehicles. They lost 475 tanks, 8,000 Bren guns, 90,000 rifles, 7,000 tons of ammunition, and more than 400,000 tons of stores, replaced by the United States in order for the Allies to continue the war against the Germans. While most of the histories about the evacuation of Dunkirk were heavy on praise for the brave British Army troops who were rescued and the wonderful efforts of the Royal Navy and the heroic boatsmen, we would be remiss if we didn't at least mention the part played by the Royal Air Force in Operation Dynamo. Regarding this event, suggests the evacuation of the British and French forces would not have been possible without the RAF. Every man at Dunkirk learned to dread the terrible sounds of the reported Stuka bomb attacks. The RAF flew hundreds of sorties to provide air cover and engaged the Luftwaffe fighters wherever they appeared. There were savage air battles as the RAF threw everything it had into protecting the evacuation, and they suffered heavy losses out of sight of the evacuees. The losses sustained by the RAF in France in 7 weeks would turn out to be higher than those that they incurred during the Battle of Britain. Churchill understood just how important the RAF contribution was, and he paid high tribute to them during his 4 June speech to the nation at the conclusion of Operation Dynamo. Nevertheless, there was an effort, an unfounded and unfortunate belief among the British Expeditionary Forces and the Royal Navy that the RAF was nowhere to be seen and therefore not carrying its weight during the evacuation. The heavy cloud cover over Dunkirk during the evacuation, and the fact that the fighters were engaging the Luftwaffe miles away and thousands of feet in the air. The RAF Fighter Command flew 2,739 missions in support of Operation Dynamo. During the 9 days of the evacuation, they lost 177 aircraft and 88 pilots. This was the first really serious check to the Luftwaffe by the RAF. I will mention a little known fact about the RAF. They lost 900 aircraft during the Battle of France, of which 477 were fighters that soon would be desperately needed for the Battle of Britain. General Heidler, chief of the German General Staff, recorded in his diary on 30 May, the second day of the evacuation started, quote, "Bad weather has grounded the Luftwaffe, and now we must stand by and watch the countless thousands of enemies getting away to England right under our nose." Of course, the following day, the RAF and the Luftwaffe in the skies flying again. On 4 June, Churchill spoke to members of the Parliament about the successful Dunkirk rescue. His comments that evening included his now famous line about "we shall never surrender," and I think that quote's on the front of your handout. While praising the valor of the men and women who brought the VEF home, Churchill underscored that Dunkirk had untold consequences. He reminded the Parliament that, quote, "We must be very careful not to assign this deliverance the attributes of victory. Wars are not won by evacuations." While lavishing praise on everyone involved in the rescue, especially the RAF, Churchill added, "Our thankfulness at the escape of our army and so many men must not bind us to the fact that what happened in France and Belgium was a colossal military disaster." Sir John Brooke, in December 41, obviously a year and a half later, said in a speech that he was giving that, quote, "Had the VEF not been rescued and returned to this country, it's hard to see how the Army could have recovered from that blow. Time and again throughout the years of the war, I thank God for the safe return of the bulk of the personnel of the VEF." Considerably more than the VEF was saved at Dunkirk. The evacuation likely saved Churchill his job. He had only been in office for 3 weeks when this happened. It also changed the course of the war in several respects. It energized the British public as nothing else might have done at that desperate time, and it helped make certain that the British would fight on rather than enter into peace negotiations with Hitler. Britons now had a reason to feel a sense of real national pride. There was a great value to Churchill in his new role. The enormous achievement at Dunkirk enlivened the British as no other event would until the D-Day landings at Normandy 4 years later.